Okay, awesome. So welcome to the second part of our CFP series. My name is Sierra. I am the leadership fellow for the mobile track and also an Android engineer. I am really excited for today's workshop, but I also want to call out before we even get started that writing CFPs is one of my least favorite parts of a talk writing process. I give a lot of talks around the world on Android and mobile topics, and I would rather write the actual talk on the topic itself than figure out how to write a CFP for it. I personally really struggle with expressing my own enthusiasm and passion for the topic through words. Words were never my strong suit, so I think that really comes out when I'm writing a CFP. So these are some of my best tips for how to kind of get started, and also compiled from some of our other leadership fellows. And so just to call out that, yes, I'm here talking about this, but know that in my personal life, I struggle with this stuff a lot also. And so hopefully you can really, again, bounce ideas off together and come up with solutions that work for all of us. Some important dates that we want to call out is that the Connect Recharge conference, so our upcoming Connect conference, what we're all here for to submit, it's going to happen on May 26, 2022. And then, excuse me, the deadline to apply to speak is April 25th, but we do recommend that the earlier you apply to speak, the better. This again is the second part of our CFP speaker series, and CFP stands for Call for Proposals. So it's where we request for people, where you can submit your proposal to speak at our conference. This is the second part. And so the first part we did a couple of weeks ago, and that was coming up with an idea for your talk proposal. And that is currently available on the Women Who Code YouTube channel. So if you need to go back and watch that, if you're just joining for the second part of the speaker series, that part is available for you to rewatch on our YouTube channel. And then we will have a third part of the speaker series that's going to be reviewing our talk proposal. So hopefully you come out with a rough first draft today on Friday, April 1st at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And with that, so again, last time we brainstormed some topics that you're excited about. And so today I want to start just by sharing the ideas that you're going to use for today's workshop in the chat. So if you already have an idea, if you need a couple minutes to stew and just throw something out. Something that we talked about last time was, if you missed that section, is some different ways that you can brainstorm that idea. It includes things that you work on at work, a technical case study of things that you've implemented, either in your personal projects or on the job, some kind of lesson learned after experiencing that thing, after having some experience with that topic, or something that you really want to learn more about. Using a topic that you haven't used yet is a great way to learn out in public with our community live. So if you want to share some ideas of what you're planning on writing a proposal for it before we jump into how to write a proposal, feel free to drop those in the chat now. And then some of the examples from our last session, breaking production was my personal example. We had someone submit some ideas about being a generalist, and some of the ideas that came out of that were a talk about a guide to seniority with being a kind of generalist technologist. Someone said they were going to talk about the Google Cloud Platform. We had someone say that they really wanted to speak about React. And I know we have some at least one React folks here. Bluetooth on mobile, that's again one of my topics. And then someone mentioned Angular last time. So we have one idea. I recently relearned the cool stuff you can do with SSH config. I was thinking I could do a talk on SSH basics and go into cool things you can do with SSH. I think that's a great topic because I don't know anything about SSH besides setting it up on GitHub. Any other talk ideas that you all want to share before we jump in? I do kind of recommend having maybe a notepad open or having some pencil and paper to actually work through these different steps of this process today, even if you're not willing to share those ideas in the chat. I do think that if we share it together, it's going to make it easier for all of us to kind of pull together those ideas. Ooh, I work as a Shopify developer, so I might talk about how that works. Again, a great topic. Reading source code to create custom solutions from Beth. Python from Emma. Awesome. Something with extensibility. Awesome topics, everyone. I want to share how I went from being insecure and shy to a leadership role. Also an awesome topic. We do have our career navigation track as well, so that's also a way to go. Some of the examples that I showed here are very technical topics, but we do have both our technical tracks as well as the career navigation track, where you can talk about things like career progression, negotiation, finding the right job, and these kinds of things. We have Michaela says, I like iOS development, but not sure what I'd speak about. Sunita, thinking about architecture principles like solid principles. How to go from big business problems to concrete data science problems. Love that topic. All right, so everyone has some great topics, and that's awesome. All right, let's jump in now. Okay, so there's also often the question of, once you have that topic, where do you go from here? Do I start with a topic? Do I start with a description? Do I start with the presentation? And I really think that this is going to be a chicken and an egg problem, where you can really start with any of those, depending where your inspiration is. With this breaking production topic that I came up with last time, I immediately had a title for that. And so that's where I would start for that particular presentation. I also already mentioned that I often would rather write the presentation than the description itself. And so writing that I have written entire presentations before actually writing the abstract or the description at all. And so some of this is just going to be personal preference, and there's not going to be a right or wrong answer to where you should start with your presentation. But in general, some of our advice for how to get started is going to be bullet point out your talking points and create an outline. And this is going to be really useful for both writing a good, strong description and submission, and then also taking that outline and turning it into an actual presentation as well. And we'll look at some examples of how I've done that in the past in the next couple of slides. And then you can add a fun and informative title to round out your submission process, and then writing your presentation. If you want to write your presentation ahead of time, that's totally fine. Like I said, it's a personal preference of what's going to work for you best, but you do need to remember that writing a presentation is going to take a good chunk of time. And so you probably want to plan for that before jumping into a submission process. The submission is going to close, in our case, in about a month from now, April 25th. Making sure you have time to write that presentation and get a description and title put together before that submission window closes. So now we're going to kind of jump into the first step of this, which is going to be bullet point out talking points and write out an outline. We had a really great question recently for some of our speakers, seasoned speakers, is how much research do I need to do before I write my outline and proposal? And I gave my favorite answer for almost every question that I ever get is it's going to depend. But in reality, the answer to this question is you're always going to have to do research before you write your outline in your proposal. But it depends really whether that research has already been done. So we talked a little bit last time about different ways to find your topic. And again, some of those included thinking about things you've implemented at work or in personal projects that you might want to share with our community. And so in those kind of cases, you've already done that research. And so you might not have to do any extra research before you sit down and write a proposal. If you already have all those kinds of things in your head, then you can probably write out that bullet point and outline just based on your experience. But that experience is the research that you've already done to write the outline and proposal. The other kind of talk that I think is really fun is going to be a talk on something new and exciting in your field that you really want to learn and is recent and relevant to folks in your technical specialty. I've done talks like this, and we'll see an example of this a little bit later as well. And so in that case, you might have to do a little bit of research up front to figure out what the important topics are, what you need to research and figure out and include in this talk, because you don't necessarily have that experience going into writing that outline already. But again, the answer to both of these questions is that research has been done before sitting down and writing a strong outline and proposal. It just depends if you've done it on the job. And so when it's time to write, you don't have to do that extra step explicitly, or whether you're doing something new and have to do that step explicitly before writing out the outline. So here are some examples that I've written out and have turned into presentations. A little bit about me is I actually started my career doing accessibility and mobile for a banking app. And so this is something I know a lot about and can just sit down and talk to you about accessibility without having to do much research on my own time. And so for this, I could write out some important things that I wanted to make sure I included in my both my conference talk and in the submission that I submitted to Connect. So I gave this talk at a few Connects ago now. And so some topics that I wrote down is talking about why accessibility is important. So giving people the background on why they should care about it. And that was important to include in my submission because it answered the question of why someone should say that they were interested in this kind of topic. I also wanted to give an overview of the Android accessibility framework and different things you could use, features that folks could use to access these accessibility features so they knew how to work it. And then go over some common pitfalls and how to fix those as well. And then go over some testing. I could also take this outline and take it a step further to start creating the outline for my talk. So once I had those 4 bullet pointed high-level talking points, I could go down and kind of drill into those and talk about more specific things that I was going to need to include in my final presentation. And so under common pitfalls, I could add things like color contrast, touch target size, content descriptions, and others. And under testing, I knew there are different types of testing for accessibility. And so I could add bullet points under that, like manual, automated, unit testing, and LIMP. And so just by writing out this high-level outline, I now have a very clear picture of both what my presentation is going to look like and also what I need to include in my description to let people know what I'm going to talk about during this presentation. This is my example of something that I picked totally out of the world of Android because I thought it was really cool. And so when I sat down to write an outline for getting started with MLKit, the only bullet point I really had is, this seems really cool and I would like to learn more about it. And so this is an example of something I had to do research on and plan my time accordingly so that I could both do the research on and write the presentation description before that submission deadline closed. So for me, that meant I had one weekend where I wrote up a little proof of concept application using MLKit, looking at the different options of this SDK for Android and seeing the different pieces and where I could go from there to write a really cool presentation. This was also specifically for a lightning talk. And so the other thing I was really trying to figure out during that research phase is, can I write a good and meaningful and impactful presentation on MLKit in just 15 minutes? And so those were 2 questions I was trying to figure out during that research phase, because I had never used it in production, but I had seen some people build out some really cool apps using MLKit. And so after doing that, I was able to kind of narrow it down. So for something like MLKit, they have a lot of different APIs associated with them that can do a lot of different things. And I couldn't cover all of those different topics in one specific presentation. And so I really needed to narrow my scope down. And that's what I learned during that research phase. And so with this particular presentation, I narrowed it down to the image labeler API for MLKit. And then I narrowed it down to 3 specific talking points that I could use for a lightning talk, which was going to be, what is MLKit? What is the image labeler API that I'm using with MLKit? And then how to set up and use it in a small proof of concept application. So these are the 2 different kind of ways you can kind of go with thinking about how to build out your outline. So I want to take a moment now and give you all a couple of minutes to write out three bullet points, whether you share them. I would love to see those in the chat so that we can give feedback to each other, but also just writing out a couple of different bullet points for those topics that you give. you've given to start writing out that outline and taking you to the next step of this workshop. So we have a question in the chat while we wait here for just a couple of minutes is, do you have any advice for starting with a lightning talk versus a full length talk? I'm sure I could fill a whole hour if I wanted to go into details of SSH, or I could do just a lightning talk and lightning talk on the basics and how to use SSH config to make your life easier. So part of the advice that I give on that is some of it is going to be personal preference. And if you've given talks before, we do at Women Who Code like really encourage those technical talks. So if you have 35 minutes of content and you think that it's relevant to our community, I say absolutely go for it, especially if you're comfortable talking for that long. But that can be really intimidating for your first technical talk. I was certainly intimidated for mine, but not to project my feelings. And so it's really, so maybe for your first talk, you might want to consider a lightning talk. The other thing that I always talk about is if you've given a lot of full length talks, thinking about challenging yourself to maybe do an impactful lightning talk is going to be also a really great option. Is how can you narrow down the scope and think about this in only 10 minutes of sharing knowledge to other folks. Or if you've given lightning talks before, how can you expand on that topic and make it a full-length in-depth talk? Particularly for this ML kit example, it started as a lightning talk, and then I did expand it into a full-length talk by digging into some of these things that on the first iteration of that lightning talk, I only did the high level, here's exactly how you put it in, and you get the basic implementation. And on that second iteration of that talk that was much longer, it was how do we customize this? How do we build our own models and do these sorts of things as well? We also have a question in the chat or in the Q&A of, I'd love some tips on how to go about shortening or extending a talk, like 40 minutes to a lightning talk or vice versa. So if anyone has any tips on those that they would also like to share, feel free to drop those in the chat as well. Again, I love interaction with these sorts of things. We're all here to learn together. Some of my tips are narrowing down the most impactful information from your full length talk, or picking a specific area that you think is really important and pulling out all that background information as well. So maybe you don't need to talk in depth about every single thing, and pick out one single piece of that talk, and you could possibly even break it up into multiple lightning talks if it hit different topics. And that gives you an option to give it to multiple different audiences. Taking a shortened talk and expanding it, I often think about like customization. That's especially true, I think, in mobile, is there's a lot of default implementations of things. And so how do you customize this? How do you think about edge cases for this sort of code? And how do you scale this code or talk about testability of this code and these sorts of things? Some of those things aren't always going to fit into a single talk. And so pulling out those things that we don't always talk about when we just talk high level, like testing and scalability and these sorts of things, is one way to take a lightning talk and extend it into a longer talk as well. And Anna also added interaction or activities with the audience is also a great way to extend a talk as well. Let's see. We got some sustainability and blockchain. What is blockchain? What is the environmental impact? What is important to focus on sustainability for our planet? Why should we care? How do we contribute? Love that answer. All right, so with that, let's move on to the next part of our slides. And so here we're going to think about some important questions to ask and answer yourself when you're writing your submission. So some abstract high-level tips of answers, that things you can think about when you're writing both your outline and then converting it into the description that you're going to share with the reviewers, is stating your main point up front. What problem are you trying to solve, and what ideas are you trying to present? Next, what background will you present to support your main thesis? What unique perspective do you have on this topic or problem? Why is this relevant to the conference, the track, or the broader industry? And what should the audience take away from this talk? And so these are kind of 5 questions that can help you guide you into crafting that impactful description for the reviewers. I particularly think that things like the unique perspective that you have on this particular topic or problem are particularly relevant if you want to go something that's more an introductory talk or a high level talk as well. A question came up last time about if this talk has been given before at a different conference, or there's already a ton of videos on YouTube, does that mean I shouldn't try to submit that topic for this conference? And the answer is always no. Because everyone is going to have that unique perspective on this particular topic. How are you going to present it? What challenges did you face? What kind of background did you bring into solving this particular problem or learning this particular technology, or how your personal career progressed? And so you always have those unique perspectives, but making sure to make that clear in your abstract can give your reviewers a reason to pick that topic versus a generic topic that just says we're going to go over these high level topics. Why do you bring a specific perspective or unique perspective to that particular topic? Next, this has kind of already come up a little bit, is how long will my talk be? And so for our Women Who Code conference, we have lightning talks that are 15 minutes plus Q&A, technical talks that are 35 minutes plus Q&A, career sessions, which are also 35 minutes plus Q&A, and workshops, which are 50 minutes plus Q&A. And so the reason that this is going to matter is that the length you choose is going to determine how much detail the reviewer might expect in the description that they read. And so some examples here is if I'm giving a 15-minute lightning talk on Kotlin, then I probably only have time to talk about a couple of high-level features and give some examples of why that's important. And so for that particular abstract, I might write something like, during this session, I will share the top 3 reasons that I really enjoy working with Kotlin: data classes, nullability, extension functions, and go through an example for each. And so this answers a couple of the different questions that we thought about in our first slide of abstract tips, is answering why my unique perspective is, this is why I personally enjoy working with Kotlin. I also clearly state what problem I'm going to present to you, which is going to be the top 3 reasons that I like this language, and name those out so that you know what to expect going in. And then also just some takeaways with that is that you're going to learn a little bit about data classes, nullabilities, and extension functions, and have examples to go with that. And I know that I probably can't go much more in depth than this during just a 15-minute lightning talk. With 15 minutes, I can probably only go through 3 to 5 topics during that particular presentation. Whereas if I'm going to give a 35-minute technical talk on Kotlin, then I can dive a little bit deeper into some of the basics. So I might be able to give you more background about how to use Kotlin and the basic syntax that I might skip over in just a high-level presentation about why I like Kotlin, and some of the important and wonderful features. So that might relate back to things like nullability and data classes and extension functions, and how those make it easier to work with. And then I can explore use cases for those features. And because it's a 35-minute talk and I have ways to interact and show the audience code in a much longer style presentation, I'm actually going to write a simple Kotlin program to demonstrate these features in action. And again, I am not the world's greatest description writer, so take everything with a grain of salt. But that's kind of like the difference of what you can think about if you're doing a 15-minute lightning talk versus a 35-minute technical talk, is how in depth you're going to go into those topics, or how many high-level topics you might expect to see during that lightning talk. Emma asked in the chat, are lightning talks technical talks as well? You can submit a lightning talk for either the career navigation track or the a technical talk as well. So you can really go either direction. My examples are heavy on the technical side, but you can submit either kind of talk for that as a lightning talk. Could you please allow college students to give talks in conference? There are many college students and Women Who Code. maybe Stephanie or Anna can speak to this, but I don't think that is a disqualifier for speaking at our conference. But they will have to okay, so that's what I expected. Anna said everyone is welcome to apply, so you can absolutely submit regardless of whether you're a college student or industry professional. And are these slides available somewhere? Yes, I can make these slides available and email them out to all of our participants as well, so that you can have access to them. Michaela, our presentation is usually done with keynotes or PowerPoint slides usually. I personally make all of my slide decks right now with Google Slides, but I know a lot of people really like Keynote as well. And then some folks have Canva has gotten really popular for slide decks as well. And you can make very beautiful slides in Canva, but really any of the slide options are going to be totally fine for making your presentation. And it just depends what kind of decoration you want to add and which one of those choices make it easier, or which one you're the most comfortable with as well. I'm going to say something else about that. And then we have a question in the Q&A. Do workshop sessions require hands-on activities with the audience? Do we need to consider that to slow down and also require setup? So a workshop is really going to be up to you. They have typically been some kind of code along. I have seen several code alongs in the past. I remember one of our mobile members gave a workshop on building a tip calculator with Swift, which was really cool. And so that is definitely something that you probably want to think about as you go through your presentation, is the correct speed to go through. If you're typing live during a workshop, it's often going to be at the correct speed for your audience. This setup question might be something you want to include in your description so that your audience knows ahead of time. Something like Android Studio, for example, which is what I work with, would take a really long time for folks to set up live during a workshop. And so that's not going to be something that I particularly want them to do live. They're really going to they might want to consider doing that ahead of time if they want to follow along as well. With any kind of workshop, people are going to join and maybe just watch you code and not do any coding at all. But you can consider slowing down and the setup depending on your topic and how long that setup is going to take as well. Okay. All right, so the next question that we want to ask ourselves when we're setting up our description is, who is my audience and how experienced should they be? And this is going to help you develop the narrative of your description. Some things to think about is, what is your expert level? So number one would be someone very new to the topic. Two is going to have some experience, and three could be an expert in that topic. And also thinking about who the audience of your presentation is going to be. New engineers, people learning Python, aspiring designers, people managers, other experts, and there are lots of other topics that, or other audience members that you could consider there as well. The reason that this is important, again, like thinking about how long your talk is going to be, is it might change the way that you talk in your description. If my target audience for my Kotlin talk is going to be someone that has no Kotlin experience, I might want to add a sentence about just what Kotlin is so that they know what to expect from this talk. So I might want to add a sentence like, Kotlin is an object-oriented, strongly typed JVM language that is more concise and easier to use than Java. Fighting words, I know. And so I might need to include that high-level description before I jump into whatever content is after that I want to go through, because my audience, I'm assuming my audience may not know that background, because I'm assuming my audience has no Kotlin experience. On the other hand, if I want to talk about some specific Kotlin topic that requires you to have some kind of expertise or some kind of experience working with Kotlin already, that sentence is not going to be super relevant, because I'm assuming my audience is already going to have that background and I can jump straight into my topic. And so thinking about your audience can also kind of help you put together that proposal that matches both your audience, your narrative, and your description, and pull those all together. A pro tip for me is, once you've identified your target audience, talk to someone in that audience about your topic. So we're working through kind of coming up with that outline, identifying our topic, pulling together how long it's going to be and who our audience is. And so we really want that our audience to be excited and interested in the topic that we're putting together. And so finding someone in that audience, show them your outline, ask them questions about what would be helpful, what would be interesting, what they would like to learn more about that particular topic can help you craft a really strong submission for that particular topic as well. And we're really lucky here in the Women Who Code community is that we have a whole wealth of people that we can talk to. So if I'm trying to convince people that they should try using Kotlin with Jupyter to do math, then I'm going to reach out to the folks in the Python community and say, hey, is this something that you would be interested in learning more about, is using Kotlin with Jupyter Notebook instead of Python with Jupyter Notebook? What kind of topics are you more interested in seeing? If I want to talk about Kotlin multi-platform and how to build that for both iOS and Android, I probably want to reach out to my iOS friends and say, hey, I really want to talk about Kotlin multi-platform and I want it to be relevant to all mobile developers. What kind of topics are you as a Swift and iOS developer particularly interested in? And so take advantage of our community and your community at work and your community of friends to help craft that submission so that it really helps the audience that you're trying to target. So a couple of things to remember is think about Women Who Code's mission, vision, and the core audience of our events. And introductory talks are great, but don't be afraid to do advanced topics and get technical. Here at Women Who Code, we do, our target audience is that mid to level engineer with 2+ years of experience. So we're expecting a lot of our audience to have some kind of technical background. And so this is a great place to really flex your expertise and show what you can do and talk about those technical topics that you get the opportunity to maybe do at work. Come and show us those expertise at our conferences. And also, something to remember is that our reviewers usually are going to have a background in the topic that they're reviewing. So if you select a mobile topic, you will have other mobile reviewers looking at that topic and description. And so you can assume some kind of level of competency for most of the reviewers on your topic, especially if you're thinking about doing those advanced topics. I wanted to share some of the most common reviewer feedback that I've seen over the last couple of years of doing these reviews is that I wish it had more details and I'm not sure if it's right for our core audience. So that's something to think about as you're writing these proposals out, is having enough details to be clear about what your problem is, how you're going to talk about, what you're going to present on that topic, and what the key takeaways are, and how is it fitting in the Women Who Code mobile, or I usually say Women Who Code mobile, Women Who Code community at large. Who is our audience? Who are we trying to support in this particular organization? There's a lot of conferences out there, and Women Who Code might not be the best choice for every single topic, but those topics can also be submitted to these other conferences. But you want to make sure that you're submitting for the right topic for the right conference for the right audience. So want to stop here quickly, see if there are any questions before we move on to taking that outline and really writing out our actual description. All right, so my best recommendation for when it comes time to actually take this outline, we've thought about all these different questions that we can answer and add into our description, is that your description should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Here's some abstract tips that I have to kind of actually change this into full sentences to submit to our reviewers. Your first sentence should maybe try to catch the reviewer and audience's attention by displaying that topic and why it's interesting upfront and obviously. The second and maybe third sentence should present your main thesis and the supporting background information, which could include some background on you, what you bring to the table, that unique perspective and your background, and why you want to give this talk or why you think it's important. And then a final sentence with some key takeaways. This is obviously not the only way that you can submit a abstract, and you want to craft that again to whatever your particular topic is and what makes sense. But this is a good kind of guide for your first draft of things that you might want to include in that description. And so here's an example is if I wanted to give a talk on Jetpack Compose, if I want to make sure that it's relevant to a broader audience than just Android developers, I might want to start with a sentence like, you may think that Jetpack Compose is only useful if you want to write Android applications. And then switch to that second and third sentence to add my main thesis and what I really am going to talk about. In reality, Compose is a powerful declarative framework that can be used to manage state and integrates with Android, web, and desktop with all of the features of Kotlin. So that presents that Compose is a declarative framework. That's important background on Compose, that it manages state. That's an important feature of Compose. And specifically that it integrates with Android, web, and desktop is what I really want to call out here for my audience, is that this particular talk might not just be for mobile engineers, but might be for a much broader audience of engineers who can all take advantage of Compose, but might not know that about this particular framework. And then maybe wrap up with a final sentence. During this talk, you'll learn the basics of Kotlin and Compose, how to build a multi-platform Compose application, and why Compose is a useful and fun framework to know. And so that final sentence is something to kind of wrap it up together and give my audience the key takeaways that they're going to get from this particular session. So we have a couple of questions. Is it okay to have a humorous or tongue-in-cheek title, or is it better to have a title more serious? I'm all about puns and alliteration and jokes, so we do have a section on titles a little later, so I'm all for it. And is an abstract always one page or paragraph? It is not always. I have seen some 2-paragraph abstracts as well. Some of that depends, again, how long your talk is going to be, or how it makes sense. I have submitted 2-paragraph talks where 1 paragraph was a little bit about the framework I was going to talk about, and the second was really about this talk specifically. So some of those questions are going to be up to you and how you want to submit your abstract. So a couple of tips for actually writing, editing that to make it the most powerful and strong submission is edit for clarity and brevity. So this will make your writing style more powerful. Remove redundancies, something like successful solution. The solution is successful, and so that extra word of successful doesn't necessarily add anything to that description. Remove filler words, as it has been shown, stuff basic tenets. Avoid passive tense. So the architecture was designed by the lead developer versus the lead developer designed the architecture. Remove there is or there are. Again, there are many ways to design a database for high availability, or we can design a high availability database in many ways. Use verbs over nouns. Strong engineering leadership fosters creation of diversity and growth for engineering team versus strong engineering leadership creates diversity and grows an engineering team. So these are some tips to kind of review that first draft and try to take it from first draft on paper to where you want to be when you submit that final submission. We have a question in the chat. The background and description should not identify us though, right? If the review is anonymous. We do see descriptions with people's names in them, especially with first names. We're probably not going to be able to identify you, especially considering that our reviewers are from a community around the world, but probably not always something that you want to, but probably a good idea to maybe not include your name for that. But again, we see descriptions in both ways, with and without names, and it doesn't necessarily get you in or kicked out either way. So we really focus on the content and the description and the topic that you're presenting, not so much the name in that description. Okay, so now let's talk titles. I will pull some slides actually from our senior project program manager, Mackenzie, that she presented last year during our CFP series, is looking at some example titles. And so these are some titles that we have seen in the past, something like Design for AI, An Introduction to Mule, Analyzing Water Quality, Problem Solving Like a Pro. These are okay titles, but they don't necessarily explain enough about what you might be doing in that particular talk. And so we can add just a little bit of extra flair to these to make them a stronger and more relevant title for our actual talks. So for example, we can change design for AI. Why do you need creativity to design artificial intelligence products? An introduction to Mule, how it makes API development easy. Analyzing water quality with GeoJSON and Node-RED. Problem solving like a pro, applying the scientific method to P1 investigations. And so adding that extra context is going to tell the audience and tell people reviewing the talk what they should expect from your description, and also when your talk is selected, what your audience should expect from that talk as well. Gives your audience a quicker way to figure out which talks they might want to go to and which ones are most relevant to them. Again, some personal examples. My personal preference is almost always something kind of silly, punny, alliteration, and then colon, the actual topic itself. So I have some topics, some talk titles like Android for Everyone, Accessibility in Android, To Infinity and Beyond, Intro to Jetpack Compose, Seeding the Model, Getting Started with MLKit, Fix, Forgive, Never Forget, Lessons Learned from Breaking Production. Something I did want to call out is something that can kind of make your submission kind of fun and stick out a little bit more is finding some kind of theme to put into your talk throughout that talk and throughout the description and title as well. And that's especially true if you're doing something like building something from scratch. I'm going to show that project live. So for example, for To Infinity and Beyond, an Intro to Jetpack Compose, with the name Jetpack Compose, I leaned right on into that space theme and picked using the Mars rover NASA APIs for my example project and themed everything with little rocket ships. And so I leaned into that with my title, with To Infinity and Beyond, and adding some of that flair into my description as well. Similarly, with Seeding the Model, Getting Started with MLKit, the application that I built for that particular talk is a plant identifying application. And so the entire application is about, the entire presentation has themes about flowers and identifying flowers. And so I was able to, again, add that into my talk title and add that into my description about seeding the model, growing your skill set, and leaning into these kind of verbiage. I've seen a lot of topics also, a lot of submissions also be themed with things like Star Wars themes and other classic nerd and tech themes as well. So something to think about when you're submitting is if you're going to build something, you can pick a topic and just lean into that throughout your presentation, throughout your description, throughout your title, and that will make your topic stand out. And it also makes it really clear to the reviewers that you've thought already about what you're really going to present and build, because you have that theme throughout the title and description. And then I added a quick bonus slides is writing your bio. I really struggled to write my bio the first time. So here's some quick tips for writing your bio: who you are and what you do, why you are the right person to give this talk, and some fun and interesting facts. That might be educational background, hobbies, where you can be found on social media, or your recent travels. My particular template for writing bios when people tell me they don't have a bio is so-and-so is a blank at this company in location focusing on something specific. If you read my bio, it reads exactly: Sarah is an Android engineer, is a mobile engineer at Atomic Robot in Cincinnati, Ohio, focusing on native Android. And then adding a sentence about some aspect of your work or tech that you really enjoy. For me, this is accessibility and building really fun UI. So my next sentence is something like, she enjoys building beautiful and complex accessible Android applications and speaking with the community. And then add a fun sentence about fun facts or something you can do outside work. Mine is, you can find me playing with my dogs or hanging out with my sisters. Something to remember here with these is that your title and description will be reviewed anonymously. So they are going to be the start and star of your submission process. And reviewers won't be able to see your bio, but it is going to be used to introduce you when your talk is selected at Connect. So putting a little bit of thought to it can be helpful. And that is something you're going to submit with your talk title and description during the CFP process. If you need more resources, now that this second session is wrapping up, we do run this speaker series for the CFP process every year. And so you can go back and check out some of our past years' resources as well as this year's resources by going to womenwhocode.com/CFP-resources. And so there are other topics there, including how to actually write your talk and these sorts of steps as well. so that you can start thinking about those next steps after you submit your topic. If you want to follow us or register for all of our other events, we do have lots of technical events in between these CFP series. You can find all of those womenwhocode.com. And then thank you all for joining us today. If you all have any questions, we can take those now, can chit chat about it in the app. Otherwise, I cannot wait to see all of your fantastic submissions to Connect, and then also to our track submissions as well. We're always looking for speakers year round for all of our many technical events. Question in the chat, what has been my favorite talk? I really like that ML kit talk. Most of my other talks are very Android focused and very intense Android. ML kit I really enjoyed because it was a topic that I personally picked because I thought it was cool. I consider it more of an Android party trick. You don't have to know almost any Android to do it at all. And actually most of it is actually done in a Python code editor. But I really enjoy that talk because it's something I'm not an expert in. It is something I did just for funsies, and it's also themed with pictures of my dad. So that makes it fun and family oriented, and I love that about him. The recording from today will be available on YouTube probably in the next couple of business days, and I will send these slides out to everyone who registered for this event shortly after this as well. And I can probably share those with our Women Who Code headquarter team, and they can probably add it to the CFP website as well, the CFP resources website as well, to be able to access there. And that I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording.